Hello, Camp Blue Spruce friends. I hope that this video is finding everyone super well. This is really weird times, and I have been trying to find activities that I can do myself to keep busy. And in the meantime, I thought that there was no reason that I shouldn't share these activities with everyone else. I literally started it, and I was like, I think that my campers would really like this one too. So, one thing that I have really struggled with the self-quarantine is spring season is coming. This is one of my favorite times of year because I love watching all of the little tiny plant babies come out of the ground. I love planting. I feel like I could feel all of the energy coming from like the plant's excitement to be outside of the soil. So I have struggled with not being able to go and get materials that I want for planting, and so I've really had to look around my house and find out what I had and make the best of the situation that we're in and be the most responsible community member I can be. So one thing that I have been working on prior to the whole self-quarantining is I set up a little seedling grow station with egg cartons and planted seeds and then a grow light on top, and I noticed things just were not growing as fast as I wanted them to, so I did a little bit of research, and turns out I probably just need more humidity and more heat. So I would go out and buy one of those nice like seed heating pads. It's just like a little mat that warms up the seeds from the soil. But I'm trying to be responsible. So I found one of those clamshells my roommate bought Costco muffins in a while ago. And it conveniently closes. It's see-through, so light can penetrate it. And the benefit of it closing and holding the moisture in is that it is circulating the moisture inside of itself instead of letting it evaporate and release. So I'm kind of going to give this a go, a little test run, and I thought this could be a really fun project for anyone at home. If you have some spare seeds lying around, maybe you feel comfortable ordering seeds, and maybe you have some soil lying around too, or another one of these clamshells. These clamshells aren't recyclable, so it's a really great way to repurpose these. What I was using before I found the clamshell was egg cartons, which are awesome. They unfortunately though absorb water really fast and send it away, so I think that's why my seedlings were not staying wet enough and warm enough, because they also have no closing system. Well, I ripped off the lids, but still, this is kind of like a really cool idea that I was hoping would work out. So if this is an experiment you guys want to run at home too, I think it would be a fun project for the family. I found some dill seeds that I just had, some sweet basil, and some basil sweet Thai. So I'm going to plant some of these. One thing that's really important when you're planting seeds is labeling them so that you know what you're getting when they're coming up. And that means that you also know what they need once you need to transplant them. And I'm sure maybe in the future I can post a video once these babies have gotten big. Hopefully they get big. And we'll kind of go through the process of transplanting. Disclaimer, I do not consider myself a professional on any of these matters. I would say I am an enthusiastic, not novice, but enthusiastic gardener. So yeah, I can answer some questions, but I also am really great at trying to find answers because I'm constantly asking myself gardening questions. So if anything, I'm an expert in finding information. Okay, so a couple things that you'll need, like I said, are seeds. Hopefully you might have some random ones lying around. Honestly, at this point, if you just plant some flowers, then I feel like that's even more exciting to watch, you know, come up. It doesn't matter what plant it is. I think it's just so rewarding and exciting to really connect with seedlings that are popping up, and you see all of like the effects that the tiny details of things that you're doing have on these tiny little seedlings, and it's really, really rewarding. So you could plant honestly anything, just you know, giving ourselves something to do and look forward to when we're being limited right now. I thankfully have some herbs, but I also have some wildflower seeds that I could also plant. I just decided to go with herbs. Some things that you need were the seeds, a clamshell. If you can't find one of these, like I said earlier, you could do egg cartons. It's just I really liked the idea of the closed, humid system with this one. That seeds really do well with heat and humidity. And then you could also, I've seen some people doing toilet paper rolls, which I know that SOS toilet paper. But if you have any rolls that are, you know, getting thrown away, you can save those. Fill those with soil and plant the seeds in those as well. It kind of defeats the humidity system, but another thing that you could do is take a Ziploc bag and put the seedlings in the Ziploc bag with like the toilet paper roll, so you would like zip it in, and that kind of would create a closed humidity system too. I would prefer probably clear, just in case the seedlings start to come up. They're going to need some sunlight. So. And those are some alternatives. You're going to need water. And also another thing that might be something you might have to find is potting soil. So I thankfully just had some laying around, but you know, that could be something that maybe you had to order, or you know, if worst case scenario, I like to wing a lot of things because I don't think that everyone's always going to have the perfect conditions and for everything. So a lot of times I will find alternatives to stuff. And if I was really desperate right now, I would totally just take some soil from my garden. I don't know, honestly, if it would end up working, but when we're limited, we just have to try to start experimenting. So, you know, if it works, then it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'd love to hear if you had to use outside soil, how it worked. I'm super curious. I just kind of got lucky and I had my own potting soil. But the most important thing for us right now, I think, is being responsible community members. So if you are able to use some of your soil at your house, please do so. So the first thing that I started doing before I started this video and realized that I wanted to involve everyone was I started to poke holes in the plastic. So this is going to be my drainage holes, because we don't really want the soil to like stay wet. You want it to be damp, but you don't want it to stay wet. So it can get moldy and it can cause root rot for plants. So good drainage is really important, and that's why egg cartons can work, and toilet paper rolls can work, is because that water can exit just because of the material. So I started poking holes in this. Like I said, I'm queen wing it with what you got. I have a thermometer, a meat thermometer, and I was stabbing it with that. So there's probably alternatives. This I found to be the best because it's straight, it's pointy, and so this is what I have. So I'm just going to keep poking holes throughout. And this is something that I would recommend a parent help with, just to make sure. The plastic can be kind of hard, and we just want to make sure that we're being safe. So this is something that maybe a parent can help with. All right, so we're about halfway. So I've got some full coverage holes in here. Hopefully this will be enough drainage. If it's not, then I'll just remember that for next time and try to poke more holes. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to want to do in our little humidity seedling box is we're going to want to put in some soil. So I would say for this about 1.5 inches of soil is probably going to be good. I'm not even sure if I'll have enough soil for that, but that's probably ideal. And this is just potting soil. There's also seedling mixes out there, and this one's specifically a water hold one. Probably the water hold comes from having more organic material in it, which I can totally explain to you guys maybe in another video, kind of about like soil mixes and what makes them work. But we'll definitely want to even all of that out. I found like this little clump, it's just probably not going to be helpful to a seedling, so I'm just going to take it out. I kind of want to pat this down, create a little bit of firmness. If the soil's too airy and disconnected, I think it kind of gives roots a harder time to hold on. And we're just trying to give them the best chance that we can. And I would say, like, going through these processes, I never feel like I know all the right answers. I think it's just like the more I do it, the more I find different things are working better, and this didn't really work well that time, and it's all just like this big work in progress. So that's kind of the fun part. So whenever I fail and like my seedlings don't come up, like for example, I'll show you my seedling setup right now. Really only one egg carton has started to pop up, and I think it's been going for like 2 or 3 weeks now. So that kind of makes me believe that maybe it's something that I'm doing wrong, which is why I have adapted and I'm trying to find this new solution. So I think this is about as deep as I'm going to go for this guy. I was watching a video on planting seedlings, and someone had this really great tip of watering it before you plant the seeds, because then it doesn't displace the seeds once it's watered, and move them around and then maybe put them too deep or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and water this guy. So now it's nice and wet, it's just draining through. We can probably see now that the drainage holes are working, so that's positive. So I'm going to plant these in 3 different sections. I actually got as a gift some little markers, like I'll show you. So I was gifted these a few months ago. They're too long, obviously, for this project, but these are kind of fun when you're planting seeds outside, because I know for me, I spent probably a whole year working on my garden and trying to, it was basically nothing. It was crappy soil and had no plants in it, and so I started just planting a bunch of random stuff, and I never knew what was coming up except for like based on a little bit of identification that I do know, but so I would just kind of like not know the difference between some weeds and the things I was planting. So after I got these, it was super helpful because I could keep track of what was coming up and where. So those are really fun, but right now I think I'm just gonna write on a post-it note in front of where each section is. So I think I'm gonna do 2 rows for each one, do them maybe like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch apart. So I'll start with the, I have sweet basil, will be my starter. So I'm gonna make, with my finger, little holes. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4 by 2 rows that I'm making. So this is going to be the sweet basil. So I like to plant at least 2 to 3 seeds a hole, but something that's really helpful when planting is reading what's on the back of packets. So, they'll usually say what type of plant it is, meaning is it an annual or is it a perennial? And annual is when it comes back, it only lives the 1 year, so you have to plant it every year. A perennial is when it comes back every year. So this is just an annual, so once its season's over, then you can pull it and plant it next year. It tells you planting depth, which this one is 1/4 inch of planting depth, so that's about right for the size holes that I've got going. And then once they start to pop up, because I'll do multiple seeds per hole, you can thin them out, because each plant needs an optimal amount of space in between each other in order to be as strong as it can and not competing with the ones next to it. If there's a plant right directly next to it, they're going to get tangled, they're going to fight for nutrients, and you just want to give each one the best chance to be strong and beautiful plants. So this one says you want to thin them to 6 inches to 12 inches, so 6 inches to 1 foot. Kind of looking at the soil level that I'm at right now with the compaction from the water, I actually think I'm going to make it a little bit deeper. So I'm just going to add some more soil to this, just so I can give more time between this time that I'm planting and transplanting, because really you don't want to transplant them until what they say is they get their true leaves. So the first set of leaves that they get are not their true leaves. They're like their seedling leaves, and it usually is their like second to third set of leaves are their true leaves. So you'll notice on tomato seedlings, like they first come out with these very triangular leaves that don't really have any definition to them, and then as they grow, you'll see that they'll start to get the tomato leaf that you're familiar with seeing with like the zigzagginess, and so those are their true leaves, the ones that look like the actual plant's leaves. So I really want to give as much time between then for them to get some solid roots, so that they have some space to go. If they're too close to the ground, then they won't have a good opportunity to create really solid root systems. So I'm just going to make my holes again, and that feels much deeper, which I think I'm much more happy with. Also, another thing that they'll say is sun to shade. So that is just talking about how much sun these plants need once they're like transplanted and grow. This is going to be kind of past the seedling stage. Seedlings definitely need sun, otherwise they get this thing that people call leggy, where their stems are really long and really weak and there's a lot of space in between their leaves. Legginess is caused by the plant either searching for light or not getting enough light. Usually it's both of those things, and so they'll just stretch and stretch and stretch, and their stem will get really long and they won't be able to hold themselves up because they worked so hard to get further away than their stem was able to hold. So they get really weak, they break easy, and it's just not a healthy seedling. So legginess is really something we try to avoid. See-through transparent humidity box is nice because that light can get through, so we're preventing that legginess that is really hard to come back from, so we just want to avoid it altogether. So this one really likes sun, so it's sun versus shade, so you can have a partial shade, a full sun, a full shade, and this is probably a full sun plant. It also says how long how tall it can get. So this one can get 12 inches to 24 inches, so it's 1 foot or 2 feet. And then this one's also really helpful to know is days to germination. So germination is the point when a seed starts to sprout. And so this one says 5 to 7 days to germination. So that's kind of a good reference. If your seedlings aren't popping up yet, there could be a problem with heat, moisture, whatever. Seeds are pretty needy. If they don't get what they need, then they won't germinate. I'm going to go ahead and plant, I think, 3 seeds per hole. So we'll do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That one got 4. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. All right, so I've got 3 seeds per hole, and I'm going to go ahead and just cover them with some soil. So then I'm going to label that row. See that? And I'm just going to put that in front of the row that I just did. So there'll be 1, 2, and 3. All right, so now I can work on my next one, and I feel like I can just stick with the tie, or stick with basil. It says, instead of it says days to germinate, it says days to emerge, which is the same thing. So this one's a 5 to 10 days, so pretty similar. Seed depth is 1/4 inch, same. So let's go ahead and plant them. So I'm going to do my 8 holes again. Soil's still nice and wet. I'm going to go ahead and spray the soil at the end also with a mister so it doesn't mess up the seeds at all, but we can get that topsoil that I covered with extra wet, so they're going to do pretty well. All right, I'm going to do 3 again, just because that's my optimal number, because not all seeds are ready or are gonna germinate. So you really just want to give yourself the best chance per spot, and then as they pop up, you can obviously thin them, which is actually what you'll need to do for sure. And sometimes only one will pop up, and then you'll understand why it was good that you did multiple, because some are just not going to germinate. They're kind of duds. They're duds in a way. Right, and I'm going to cover those holes up. Okay, and I'll label those. Those are the sweet Thai basil. Alright, we've got our 2 rows done. The last one kind of interrupts our basil box, but is dill. So let's see, dill says, all of them look different on the backs too. Like depending on the brand, they have very different styles, so you really have to kind of like search around. So this one says approximately 2 weeks, depending on soil and conditions. So this one, I feel like, is actually, from reading it, it prefers to be just sowed directly outside, which actually is going to make me change my plans, because things that like to be directly sowed, which means planted outside, typically they don't do well with being transplanted. So it's best to not. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and continue with some sweet basil, because I have some extra seeds of those, and we'll just keep it a basil box. And I'll plant my dill somewhere that I want it to live permanently, which is also going to be an annual. I spilled these seeds earlier, so they're just here wanting to be planted. They're very hard to pick up. Okay. And I'll cover these up and then I'll label them again, just so I know that I did this instead of doing dill and forgetting to label it. So we've got another sweet basil. Basil is really fun for me personally, just because I really like making homemade pesto, and basil pesto is my favorite. So I'm going to go ahead and now mist these just over the top with my squirt bottle. I really prefer in the beginning stages to water seedlings with my squirt bottle. It's kind of really tiring because you have to, but I do prefer it, so I'm going to go ahead and spray these with a squirt bottle. Okay, so my lovely roommate has labeled our plant water squirt bottle. So I'm just going to go ahead and do full squirt over all of these. So as you water soil, it's going to slowly compact down. So definitely I would say maybe more soil than you think just at first, because of the compaction from the water weighing the soil down and closing the pore space. You can see why your hand can get really tired. So that's probably good for now. Another thing that can help with limiting evaporation, and evaporation is when the water from heat is going upward. So the water is going to leave the soil, evaporate and go up, and that's kind of what creates the moisture in the air. So we want to limit the evaporation in the seedling stage because we want the soil to stay moist, not wet. We'll just have to water more if we have it evaporating. So that's why this is advantageous for us. But also, I've seen some people will put like a light piece of wood over the top of their seedlings to kind of avoid that. So we're just going to close this guy up. I'm actually going to spray the roof just to create more water, which will increase humidity. And humidity comes from heat and water in the air. So it's really a measure of water that's in the air. So I'm just trying to increase the amount of water in the air. So that'll kind of create a circular system where the water that's in here now will go either from the soil as it evaporates, it'll just rise up and then it'll catch on the walls and then come back down and just keep circulating within this system. So that's kind of the goal, and we'll see how it works. So this is my seed growing station. If you don't have something like this, which I doubt anyone does because I didn't have it until a few months ago, just try to find a south-facing window is ideal because it gets the most sunlight throughout the day, and it's best for seedlings. North-facing windows are like no. And then I would say east can be better because the sun's not as intense, and west can get really intense afternoon sun. So, but this is my grow light situation. It's kind of my remedy to light problems that I have in this house. So this is a grow light bulb that's just in a lamp that I had. And then this is like an actual like grow light situation that we kind of set up. As you can tell, it's kind of jimmy rigged, but it works really well. So these are the egg cartons that I talked about earlier that release a lot of moisture really fast. And I water these about every day. And as you can see, these are the only ones that are coming up. And that's probably a water and heat issue, probably mostly water, because in a couple of hours this will be completely dry, and that's not really ideal. So I've just chalked it up to being a water problem, which is kind of why I came up with this, because it's kind of like a greenhouse where it keeps the water inside, and it also will, like a greenhouse, ideally keep it warm as well, just trapping the heat inside. So everything leaves, water, heat, everything. So it's going to be a slower process. And then this is just for funsies. I was propagating some geranium cuttings. And if you want to know more about propagating, I can talk about that another time. But yeah, so this is going to live here. As you can see, the light's going to get in it just fine. So if any seedlings do end up popping up, they'll get a sufficient amount of light. I could also, since these seedlings haven't popped up yet, put something over the top of here to keep the water inside. But instead I just built this. So yeah, that's it.